All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to have you all here. We're going to have a full house, about 100 people in here. This is, all things considered, pretty good. I'm sure at some level, we'd like to be in person, but this is not the right time. We'd have less people from across the country. We'd be elbow bumping the crap out of each other. This is a great way to get so many of you all here across the country. For those of you who don't know what we're dealing with here, if you took a wrong turn on Zoom, you've still come to the right place. This is going to be a wonderful book launch. This is for Barry Kennedy's book, All That Monk Business. And before this evening's over, we'll tell you exactly how to get your hands on a copy if you don't have one already. Barry Kennedy, I'll give you a little bit of a bio before we get started. I know Barry from my days at the Comedy Works in Montreal. I'd seen him on stage. He was a wonderful storyteller back then. But the origins of Barry are in Winnipeg. I see Dean Jenkinson. I see Bruce Clark. There are Winnipeggers right there in my face. So how can I not mention Winnipeg and give a shout out to the Peg? Barry quickly left Winnipeg, feeling that it wasn't good for him, and moved to BC. Barry's got a double major in physics and physical oceanography. What do you do with that? You become a fighter pilot in the military. And I've heard some stories about fighter piloting, sounded like a lot more fun than I thought it might. He was part-time fighter pilot, part-time shit disturber from the stories I've heard, Barry. I hope you'll excuse the language, but that's what your friends say about you. And then once you're a fighter pilot, what can you do? You can do pretty much any goddamn thing you want, which is why Barry chose to be a stand-up comedian, an actor, and of course a writer. And I guess the rigors of the military and the discipline of the military are something that prepare you for being a writer, because he has written 3 other books. Through the Deadfall, The Hindmost, and Rock Varnish are Barry's 3 other books. And today we celebrate the latest. And I think that is a good way to introduce him as I'm going to say, a prolific writer. I've heard from his wife about his writing schedule, which is absolutely bananas. And I'll ask him some questions about that. Barry Kennedy, everybody. Let's give him a nice. How are you, Barry?
Hey, good.
Feel good about
Hey,
this?
Ali. Good to see you, sir.
We've muted everybody in the room. Obviously, you know some of these people, and
Yes, I do.
they would just be heckling you mercilessly. Barry, I'm just gonna tell people what this evening is going to be about. So,
Yeah, sure.
actually, I mean, it's going to be about a 45-minute affair, and not going to be super lengthy. We know people have their sadness and their depression to get back to, so we don't want to keep you from that. Maybe I'm just talking about myself there, but I could go on with you for a bit, but we don't want to keep people for too long. So Barry, you will be doing a couple of readings
Right.
from the book. We're going to take audience questions. I mentioned that now in case you have questions, and then we'll wrap things up, but not before. Barry, let me ask you a few questions.
Certainly.
I've been dabbling in this writing world as well, and I haven't found as much success as you because I don't have the discipline. What gets you up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. to write? How do you not press the snooze button? What makes you say I've got to do this?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of it was, to be honest, military college and a military background for a lot of years. If you get up when it's necessary to get up, and there's no real beating around the bush, and there's not a whole lot of options to it. And I just enjoy the dark of night. And when I can't do anything else but write, I find it makes me more prolific. I like that. It's peaceful. I can concentrate, and you sort of need to be able to relax in whatever manner to write. You can't. It's not like most things where if you try harder, you do better. You can't sit there and say, "Well, I know, I'll type this now and I'll get it right." You can't do that. There's no. So it's just calm and let things happen to a certain extent, and that seems to be the dark does that for me.
Thriving in the darkness. When did you? Because I remember seeing you once at the Comedy Works. Comedy Works was kind of my HQ. That's where I used to go on the
Right.
week I was performing or not. And I remember you were a great storyteller, and that was what you did. When do you go from telling stories on stage to writing those stories and then being a writer of a novel?
I don't know exactly. I've thought about it a lot myself. Uh, Primarily, I think I like the social aspect of doing stand up more than I like doing stand up. I like speaking in front of a crowd. I like doing every kind of opportunity I've had, whether it's delivering a eulogy or being at a club. But just as time went on, I found that I needed more time to write and to write something that wasn't deliberately meant for the stage. I think that was a lot of it. Like I've never written a stage play. I like the literary form. I like literature, and that seemed to capture me, and just wouldn't let go.
Good for you. It certainly seems like it. This is the fourth book, and they're all fiction. Is that
Yes,
right? They're
yes,
all
that's right.
That's the part of, to me, that's the most fascinating. You know, the book I'm writing is based on a stage show, so 90 minutes of the book are already ready. But people like yourself start with a kernel of an idea and then just build a whole world out of it. How do you keep that organized? Are there post-it notes on the opposite wall from where you are, covering the entire wall? Are you that kind of a guy? Or?
I have notes. I take notes during the day on anything that I observe anyhow. So when I'm trying to put them into a story, usually what I'll do is I'll wait till I've got a great clot of notes, and see which, and in if I invent a character, see what applies to them. I could go back sometimes 5 years to notes I've taken. I go, oh, that's why I kept that. This woman should have that characteristic or something like that. So it's an accumulation of notes and going over and over and just never throwing anything out. More than anything, I think.
That must be fun to live with, huh? Somebody who never throws anything. I think on that note, on this idea of not throwing anything out and collecting things and turning them into gold, I think we'll start the reading. Why don't you tell us what part of the book you're reading and why you chose to read it?
The book does have a prologue for about 6 pages, very short, and doesn't have to concern us right now. So I'll get right into the main character. His name's Buddy Monk. He's a barber. He lives in an apartment above his own barber shop. He's estranged from his wife, Nita, and his mother and her guy own a restaurant right across the street from his barber shop. It's not actually where these buildings are on Commercial Drive in Vancouver, but because the whole book really is as much about the drive as it is about the people on it, I just fictionalized a location, and anyone who's from the drive will recognize roughly where it is. He's waking up one morning answering a phone call from his mother, whose name, by the way, is June.
Okay.
You can't keep wild animals in your apartment. If not completely reconciled to her son's behavior, June at least finds his justifications amusing enough to cut him some slack. But this latest thing, no, it'd be abdicating parental responsibility. At Buddy's second floor desk overlooking the street, the pleasure drains from the day of morning. Sunrise is his personal time for strategizing, and his mother normally respects his regimen by waiting for a decent hour to strike. But of late, he's been sensing something astir in the old life guardian who brought him into the world, and here she is again, pouncing just as the sun lips the horizon with its inverted smile. Do you hear me? She says. Mice are wild animals. Having trouble with my landline, Buddy says. Give me a second, I'll call you back on the cell. Buddy drops the phone and scans the street below. It's one of the rare mornings this spring when Vancouver isn't being irrigated from on high. Songbirds dip and soar on test flights, shaking out the kinks for another day on the wires and ledges, the rooftops and hedges of Commercial Drive. The crows, hungover and unapologetic, scour curbside for pizza scraps, jacking around, screeching at dirty jokes, buoyant with the joy of being an unfavored species and therefore free to behave in any manner they please. A biker on a Harley thunders past, drawing from the crows' happy squawks. The whole raucous caucus sympathetic to any Confederate in public unrest and disorder. Buddy clasps and unclasps his hands, a pair of crooked grapplers that, like the rest of them, harbor less fat than a Haidam totapole. He isn't as attractive, of course, as carved red cedar, not really a pretty sight at all. Hair cropped close to the scalp, carcass hard used, face interesting enough maybe, but a good few notches short of handsome. Built less for flash than the long haul. All right, Buddy says to his mother, I'm back, but we have to make this quick. You sound hollow on that stupid old flip phone, Joan says. I hate the tone it gives your voice. Most people do. Precisely why Buddy won't dream of ditching it. Promise to get rid of the mice, June continues, and you'll never have to hear from me again. Not plural, Mum. There's no herd. One mouse. My guess is he was being harassed by his mother and bolted for the arms of someone who can relate. Good person that she is, June ignores the comment. How do you know it's a he? Male mice have a greater distance between their genitals and anus. You measured. Who measures that? What else do you do to wild animals? Her son flips over the sympathy card, and he's deformed. Buddy doesn't lie reflexively, but often it's the only way to cleanse the air of criticism. In this case, however, he's giving his mom the straight goods. The mouse popped up a week before at 3 a.m, gnawing at the plaster behind the bookshelves. Buddy awoke instantly alert and pulled out his old Karl Yastrzemski baseball bat from under the bed. When he tugged away a double handful of books, expecting the usual rodent behavior of either freezing in place or scurrying for the nearest cover, a darkish bob burted into place, landed at his feet, and sat there unfazed. Buddy, unable to credit such behavior in any rodent short of a starving wharf rat, was most impressed. Brave little rascal. No doubt panicky and confused, but brain nevertheless. Buddy isn't one to shy from confrontation. On the contrary, spends a significant portion of each day actively sinking it out. Yet he could hardly stomp the helpless night stalker, at least not with bare feet. And to scare it off only to set out traps or poison the next day reeked of dishonor. So Buddy got on his knees and squinted, studied. A broad, slightly squashed head in lieu of the normal, tightly tapered snout of a house mouse. Something wrong with the rear legs, splayed reptile-like. An odd patch of long hair on his back. A freak. A loser. Buddy jerked out a hand. Freak mouse sat. Banged on the floor. Loser mouse sniffed. Hooted like an owl. Freak loser mouse sashayed off for the passageway leading to the bathroom, taking his leave as easily as he had arrived. Like a longtime widower with a rescue puppy, Buddy Monk fell in love. What do you mean by deformed, June says. Probably an X-linked genetic disorder that's passed on exclusively through the mother. No reaction, so on Buddy forges. Besides, he has to be easier to live with than Nita. Don't start on Nita, June says. The trouble with you, mister, is you think everything about human beings can be explained by science. 7 years of study, a bunch of semesters spread over 3 universities that cut you loose the minute they caught on to your bullshit. I walked out of each one on my own 2 feet, Buddy says, and straight into jail. Please, 3-day isn't jail. What do you call it then? The school of hard knocks. Right, just like the other schools. The only thing you came out with was what you already believed going in. While Buddy assays the merits of veering off in this new direction, his mother finds the ruts her wheels previously carved and lurches back on track. Okay, what about the defecation? I've never had a problem with that. You're a riot. I mean the mouse droppings. Hard, dry flecks, Buddy scoffs. You probably inhale worse just walking down the street. And don't try to tell me you find something like that disgusting. You served tables at the Steveston Hotel when the canneries were running full tilt. The old Buccaneer pub should have permanently suppressed your gag reflex. People can change, for your information. So why don't you change into someone who likes mice? The hitch while June mulls this over gives her son his first gleam of hope. And both contestants realize that there's a shift in advantage. A few more exchanges might see Buddy in the clear. While casting around in his mind for an outflanking maneuver, a sound penetrates it doesn't immediately register as his mother's voice. Are you even listening? June says. Sorry, what was that again? I was surfing mouse porn. Hantavirus, his mother repeats. Vancouver Coastal Health dropped off a pamphlet at the restaurant. A group of viruses carried by rodents, fever, respiratory infections. You don't know what you're letting yourself in for with that thing running around defecating everywhere. It can have lethal consequences. Thanks for the concern. He says it with an earnest timbre that brings pause to the exchange. He leans back in his Value Village springback chair. An unofficial tally of points has them roughly even, precisely when his mother is at her most dangerous. Never content to safely protect a slim lead or play for a draw, at this juncture she'll often abandon frontal assault for distraction in the argument. Counterfeit weakness like a killdeer with a bogus broken wing trying to divert a predator from the nest. Anyway, June says, if you're going to refuse good advice, I'm not going to waste any more time on you. Some people have to work for a living. Me included, Buddy says. Don't pretend it's news to you that barbers close Monday. It's a worldwide phenomenon, I think. Guild solidarity or something. Only barbers who keep a proper schedule take Mondays off. I've been busy lately. That ridiculous lawsuit. Ridiculous? Civil liberties, human rights. I learned all that from you and your precious daughter-in-law. And look how you've perverted it. All right, I'll get rid of the mouse. Maybe put it on eBay. Now you're lying just to shut me up. Exactly. But he waits out a spell of dead air, almost able to smell the predictable alteration in his mother's voice. Almost a whisper. What time are you coming by today, son? What time works for you, Mom? I'm going to be tied up the whole morning, 1,001 things. Better if you wait till later. Okay. Anything you need me to pick up? Oh, I don't know right now. Nothing I can think of. The tone gives Buddy pause. Lately, his mother has been showing signs of wear, a certain tapering off of spirit. But is this reason enough for him to slacken the pressure? If anything, he ought to be applying himself more ferociously to the contest. Then again, his mom has a long day of work staring her in the face, a face that's been beaming protectively upon him these 41 years. What to do? 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, 3 heartbeats, 4. June checks in. Are you still there, son? 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, 3 heartbeats, 4. Nothing. I'll see you later, Mom. Buddy downs the phone and rakes his eyes around the bachelor apartment. Meager digs, but since the studio is directly above the barber shop, Buddy can't get any closer to work, and there's that large window overlooking Commercial Drive, a stretch of East Vancouver that supports a range of lifestyles sufficient to allow him personal free rein while maintaining a healthy level of outrage at the behavior of everyone else. True, the arrival of the mouse threatens his sense of good order and domestic discipline. But that's just to be expected when one starts a family. He transfers his attention to the outdoors, where the street is starting to flush as its arteries swell with the long and the short and the tall, the rooted and the rootless, the immigrants and the migrants, the upwardly mobile and the succumbers to inertia, the new parents and the never-wills, the caregivers and the care-for-nothings, the poets and the performers, the bookish and the booksellers, the eye-ties and the Portuguese and the LGBTs, the free-livers and the freebooters, the bums and boozers and streetcombers, the militants and the pacifists, the lawyers and the scofflaws, the dentists and the flossless, the bullies and the buskers, the shop owners and the shop worn, the native carvers of wood, and the many carvers of place. He's better now. He sets the shower running for the full 5 minutes it takes to coax a few degrees from a hot water heater that might as well be in Seattle pumping through a stone aqueduct, strips, throws off a couple of poses in the mirror, returns to the main room, Against the wall, slings furiously through 20 handstand push-ups and promenades back down the hall toward the bathroom. Mind alert, electric, and entirely given over to the pleasant business of slapping some sense into the new day.
You're getting a good degree of applause there, which you cannot hear, but I can. Did you live on Commercial Drive or close to it?
Yeah, I lived right on the drive, and the location in the book isn't where I lived, but it's the same type of setup: retail on the floor, old building, things of, and oddly enough, or strangely enough, the actual, even though the protagonist, Buddy Monk, isn't an alter ego of mine, the mouse incident actually happened when I was sleeping one night. It's almost exactly what happened, and that got the story started. So
Hey, the story is based on that. That's the kernel. That's
that
the which the entire book is has.
pretty much, but it goes into some pretty strange directions as we get into the novel.
I wanted to pass on this question that Bruce Clark asked, which is that how important is propinquity? Which Bruce, if you're not going to use the word propinquity at a book launch, then when would you use it? Great usage, great timing on that. Where you grew up, your neighbors, your friends and family in writing and fiction. I mean, is that critical for you to write from a place of knowing something or somewhere or someone?
I think it is. I wouldn't say it's the primary need. I invariably start writing about that. One of my novels was based in Cabbagetown when I lived there. One in Palm Desert, Palm Springs area, and one on Vancouver Island. So I've lived in all these places, and there's no question that there's something about the makeup of a place gives me ideas, and I have a tendency to hang around the street a lot. I talk to a lot of people, probably spend too much time in the pub, at the bar, talking to people, various things like that. But it's there's no end to the characters that you can find out there. And I don't think I've ever written a character that's specifically based on one person, but there's parts from all over the place, arms and legs being stuck on characters that whether I've flown within the Air Force sometimes, or played sports with, or doing stand-up, acting, writing, whatever. I just find variety in people the most fascinating thing.
What better way to write about people or places than from an informed place? Otherwise, it's complete sort of fantastical, magical realism type of stuff, and not.
Right. At least it gives you sort of something to build on. And so often, everything I write, every novel I've written, is I know for a fact I'm going to be cutting it back at least a quarter, sometimes even a third. So I pack it full of stuff initially with everything I can think of that relates to an area almost, and then start the long process of cutting it and shaving it and throwing things out.
One of your fans here said he thinks he knows that barber shop. You definitely struck a chord with the barber shop. If you think no Winnipeg references, that's being you're being admonished for that you
Yeah.
didn't. And Russell is saying that it reminds him of Soupy's in Toronto, and something called Fat Jack. I don't know if you know Soupy's.
There, yes, Soupy passed away some years ago now, and he had a pub in Cabbagetown. Soupy Campbell, his ex CFL All Star, and Hall of Fame middle linebacker. And when I was living in Cabbagetown, that was sort of the local haunt. There's no shortage of characters there.
Bet. I bet. Once an athlete opens up a bar, there's no way around that. Bentley was asking, are most characters composites, or one or two based primarily on a person he knows? So if it's interesting, I like that you chose Buddy as a name too, because half of Canada will just say Buddy is in that guy. Buddy came back to the bar last night, and they're talking about just some guy. You know,
Right? Yeah.
so you feel like Buddy Monk. What about the mother?
Most of them are based roughly on someone. They're mostly a mash of different people that I've known in the past. I have a tendency to write clever and humorous things based on things my mom has said, and her mother. Generally speaking, I start off with someone in mind, but by halfway through, the character is usually unrecognizable from what I started with. And so when I go back and do, the editing, especially if it requires extensive editing, the characters lose the face of the person they carried fairly quickly. So they end up not really like the person I started off thinking about.
So that's actually a good thing to mention because I'm sure you have friends who are like, "Oh, you wrote that person about me. You modeled them after me, didn't you?" But of course,
Yeah.
not the case. Always unrecognizable. You've protected yourself there. There's a few other questions we have here. I think I'll ask you after you do this second reading. We've set up the world a little bit in the first chapter
Right.
and then you were going to do another reading, a little bit shorter reading from chapter 10. Maybe you can tell us what made you want to read this part, and then we'll get into it and take some of the last questions.
Well, this is a part in the book where a swing starts to happen. There's as I mentioned before, there's a prologue to the book, and that sets things up, and people start who are referenced in the prologue only start filtering into the life of Buddy Monk and his mother and stepfather across the street in the restaurant. But I just wanted to bring June, Buddy's mother, up again to give you an idea of what's going on in the restaurant. Her guy, Al Esposito, the name of the restaurant is Esposito's, is her partner in the business, and they've just taken on a new employee. Her name is Nita, and that is Buddy, June's son. That's his ex-wife. So they're separated, and she immediately gets hired by his mom, which stirs the pots. As you can see, it allows for a lot of things to happen. A quick thing between Al Esposito and June, Buddy's mom, and at some point, fairly soon, Nita comes into work. Al walks into the bar, or into the restaurant bar. Sees June. So their business was up for lunch. That's good. Oh, Al. He's caught the tone before. It makes him sadder than you can believe. But what are you going to do? Huh? He's trying to make it for June and him. You can't stay at the head of the crowd anyway. It seems like only yesterday, anybody with a downtown sidewalk cart or a food truck serving plain boiled wieners with squeezed mustard was a lunchtime hero. Huh? Trying to open a restaurant. Look, like the guy's a hero with his own TV show. Swarmed like flies, the office workers. Then one season, somebody started with sausages on a street, German, Italian, Polish, and that trend swept over everything. Japadog came next. Japadog, if you can believe. Huh? People standing in lines halfway around a block. Now you can buy wraps, pitas, sushi, anything. Shawarmas you can get. Shawarmas, nothing. No two people in the whole town can even agree on the spelling. People plan. He's not making this up. They plan on what cart to meet at for lunch and hang around on the sidewalk, stuffing their faces instead of sitting down like human beings. Or pack into a food court in a mall. Plastic, scrunch up your leg tables, surrounded by holes in the wall, serving so much grease, salt, and nitrates. Why don't you buy lunch right from Monsanto? Him and June are supposed to come up with an answer to that foolishness. Anyways, you better put a lid on it. June's off her head today, and one of them's got to hold it together. Oh, man. Out of the sight of the customers, he sneaks a hand around her waist. Why don't you take an extra hour or so? I'll handle it till the bar starts filling up. By the way, where's Nita to help? What's with that for a new employee? Out there teaching whales how to hold protest signs? She's on a break. She was good at lunch, June says. Most of the customers knew her, so maybe they'll tell their friends who'll tell their friends who will go nowhere. What a laugh. Here, honey, here. Take my jacket. They're calling for showers. June's looking another direction, or out the window, or into the future, or nowhere at all. Al, am I old or young? What are you talking? I don't feel old. Sure, I hurt in places and my tits and ass sag, but inside, they say it's good to feel young. But what scares me is maybe I'm young in all the bad ways. I make the same mistakes. I reach decisions for reasons I can't back up. I keep on at things that scream, wake up, right in my face. I tell myself I've learned along the way, but whatever I've picked up doesn't seem to have affected my behavior. So, do I have an old body with young thoughts and feelings that never even caught up? The worst of both worlds. Al looks around a bit and says, well, if you're old, I'm really old. That's all she's going to get out of him today. June kisses him on both cheeks and the mouth, and he rushes to hold the door for her. The jacket, Al says. But it's left but clutched in his hand, and she steps out into the rain, holds her face up to the sky, and starts down the sidewalk. Al shakes his head. She's something, that one. He wishes he could snap his fingers like that and lift her up when she's down. He watches June on her way down the sidewalk until she penetrates a wall of umbrellas tipped forward against the wind. What's that he's smelling? What's that? Got a whiff of incense or something, all spicy and smoky. Oh, there it is. Sure enough, it's Nita right behind him. Must have come in through the back door. Hi, Al. Hey, how you doing, kid? You okay with the job so far? It's Commercial Drive, you know. A few characters in the neighborhood not so polite drop in. You good with that? You ask me the same thing every day. A boss is allowed to be concerned for his staff. You never heard that? Yes, and thank you. But come on, Al. This is me. When I worked up north just to see some bar band, me and a Cree guy drove 2 snowmobiles 20 miles across the tundra on mushrooms. She slips around to the front desk and opens the ledger. What do we need this reservation book for, by the way? The last entry was written with a quill. 2 reasons. 1, it looks professional. 2, you never know. Don't walk in and start changing already. Great girl, Nita, but too much buddy rubbed off on her. When Nita moves away from the counter, Al sees a sticker he knows for sure wasn't there yesterday. He peers in close. The revolution has to proceed at a furious pace. Whoever gets tired has the right to get tired, but not to be in the vanguard. Huh? Al chuffs. That all about? Che Guevara, Nita says. Che Guevara? Che Guevara. Yeah, we knew a little bit about kicking out the big shots in Italy too, in case you never heard. But when we tear down, afterwards we build up, not like them bearded bums. Al, remember the last time we talked politics? Yeah, I'm with you. Let's leave it alone. But take off the sticker, please. And if you want a rule of thumb to go by, anything you get at hippie shops, don't hang it here. Hippies? What year is this, Al? You know what I mean. Hey, you, Nita says in a shaky impersonation. Name's Al Esposito. Call me Al. You wouldn't be one of those, what is it, a hippie, would you? Got a camera here. It's okay you make a peace sign while I take your picture in front of this VW van? Go ahead, have your laugh, Al says, then laughs. Mother of God, if he was 20 years younger, no use thinking. Yeah, business should work out like this all along. Really. He'll let Nita go, let her have a little rest, mostly because he wants to sit there by himself. But, you know, that's how business works. The boss gives a little, employee gives a little. Civilized way to go through life. Except Al's left to deal with that table where an argument is broken out over the bill. June usually handles this part, the complaints and all that baloney. He loves that woman. God, loves her heart and soul. Plus, they're a good match in practical matters. He's convinced that's what everybody tries to do, even if they don't realize it. Gather around them people well equipped in the areas they fall short themselves. There's only 2 people left now, still looking at him. From their indignant faces, Al might have been caught spying on him in the shower. God, he's been here 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and this is what he's got to deal with. June and Nita better not be long, or they'll be cutting him down from a rafter like drying prosciutto. The end.
All right. Lots of applause for that. It's interesting. As a stand-up comic, you have to learn mic technique. I feel like you're already mastering laptop technique Green technique. Japadog. I thought that was fantastic. Barry, we've got a little under 10 minutes left to have some sort of respect for everybody's time. But there were a few
Sure.
questions I wanted to ask. One of my own, a few from the audience, and a few comments from the audience before I turn it over to you at the end, just to let everybody know where they can get their hands on the book and some parting thoughts from you. But I wanted to pass on a question from our common friend Ann Jansen. She says, without spoilers, what most surprised you in writing this novel?
I think the thing that most surprised me was I was halfway through the novel, maybe even a bit more, and it suddenly dawned on me that I had to either get rid of the whole beginning or I'd have to change the whole second half of the book to match the first part. And the prologue particularly it has no relation to the first chapter that I read at all. It seems to be left out dangling, which I did intentionally. And eventually that becomes an extremely important part of the book, about half to 2/3 of the way through. But by then, so much had happened without the characters in the prologue. I was faced with either chopping the prologue off and going and just continuing with what I was doing all along anyhow, or finding a way to make the prologue valid still in the story. And that's what I did finally. I actually decided to make the prologue valid and bring at least one of those characters into the story. And usually that's not a good idea to do about halfway through a book, in my opinion, anyhow. But I found what I think is a really cool way to bring it into the story, and it made the last third, even maybe the last half of the book, it really lifted my spirits to know that I didn't have to go back and try to figure out the whole book almost over again. And I went, and I think I nailed it. I was happier than hell. And for that matter, without giving anything away, it almost leaves room for a sequel. And I'm not committed to doing that yet, but anyhow, I was really scared when I realized, Jesus, this is what has been in my head all along, was the prologue, but I haven't done anything with it yet. And now I gotta do some tearing apart of this manuscript. And and you should, and for any writer, you should always do it though. You'll regret it if you go, this is good, this is good enough, this is working, and go away. No, it's going to drive you crazy forever. No, do it. Put the work in, put the time in.
A good hot tip for aspiring writers and continuing writers. And on the note of a sequel, Lee asked, Lee said that your strengths in the dialogue and the characters is amazing, but also your prologues and prose, like in your first book, Deadfall, and in Monk, are brilliant. And do you think you might write more in this vein, like short stories, for example?
I do. I will be writing in this vein. It's sort of, I've got a style that I like now, that I'm comfortable with. It allows me to tell stories the way I want to tell them. Basically, that's what it is. I'm not having to chase something or deliberately create a style. As far as short stories, I have never completed one to my satisfaction. And I don't know what it is. I get an idea in my head and it sort of explodes. And before you know it, I'm sort of out of short story territory. And I've tried in the past to write short stories. I hesitate to say that. I've outlined short stories, but I've never been able to swing my hand to do it with confidence. And if I had an infinite amount of time, maybe I would. But it seems that as soon as I'm done a novel, I've already been thinking and taking notes on the next one, and I sort of jump into it and committed to another year or two or whatever it's going to take.
So you could write the feature film, but not the short film with that much ease, basically.
That's a good parallel. Yeah, a good parallel to make. it ends up just getting bigger in my head, and then I usually end up overwriting like crazy anyhow. I'd rather do that initially, and then I'll cut back. I've cut back on this one. I bet you a quarter of the book has been eliminated in cutbacks.
Is there going to be an audiobook of this? I think a lot of people were probably wondering that because of the way you read it and how you sort of, really deliver those characters. Somebody was saying, is he doing Joe Pesci when you were doing, Mr. Esposito there? Is there going to be an audiobook?
I don't know at this juncture. I'd certainly like the opportunity to do one, that's for sure. But I'd write it out on a blackboard if I had to. It's just I like telling stories, and I like this I like this story enough. It's a fun one to read. There's other characters in there that I could play around with that I think brings something to the story.
Well, as you say, you would like to have an audiobook. As it turns out, your publisher is in the audience, and it may have some say in that. I don't know, but I did want to read you something from your publisher, Chris Needham, and
Right.
that publishing this book was such an easy decision. It is a well-crafted, polished, real gem, and he feels blessed to have been given the opportunity. And I thought it'd be nice to let you hear that as well.
Well, thank you. That's great. Thank you, Chris. I got to tell you, he's been the easiest guy I've ever worked with on any kind of project. It's been very, very nice.
The other comments so far have been people saying they're glad that you didn't chop that prologue. It is beautiful. That's Bentley who got a chance to read it. Another friend of yours, Kent, is saying that he can attest to your note taking. You met on a layover once at a bar in Vancouver, and just over one beer, you pulled out your notebook three times to take notes. Um, Spend more time with him than your notebook, and he remembers that.
Well, it's usually good if you're going to do that, is do it with a good friend. They sort of know your habits, so they don't take it as a slap in the face.
Anna Gustafson, who's running the show, says your short stories are a few. She's read a few, and they certainly do not suck. And she, from time to time, she and others are able to crowbar a short story out of you. And if anybody wants to read one of your short stories, they live on barrykennedy.ca. Is that right, Anne? All right. I'm going to, before I turn things over to you, Barry, to wrap it up, I think if you're looking to purchase the book, alllitup.ca. Chris is reminding us, go to chaptersindigo.ca, look up all that monk business. But Barry, I think it'd be great for you to say some words before we wrap up.
I'd love to, and I really would. Thank yous are appropriate here for so many people. And you, Ali, alone, my wife Tracy, executive producer of comedy for CBC, is just she's got. I think I've taken every suggestion she's ever given me about anything. Anna Gustafson, who put my website together, has set up all this. It's blown me away. Glenda McFarlane, who is the best copy editor I have ever worked with ever. She's in town here. And she's just wonderful. Another couple of people, Keith McKellar, the cover of the book. Keith McKellar, also known as Laughing Hand. He's an artist from Vancouver, and I knew him from Commercial Drive, and he did the cover, and it's wonderful. And of course, Chris Needham. There's nothing like working with someone that you get along with immediately, and it's really been a treat. And let me add one more quick thing here. Coming up in May are the Canadian Screen Awards, and one Ali Hassan has been nominated as Best Host of a Web Program or Series. Yes, the very Ali Hassan that you were pointing out there. Now, the interesting thing to me as well is that his opponent, the other person up for it, is my brother-in-law, Peter Callahan. So those two will be battling it out. So please, watch it, tune into it on TV. I'm telling you, it's going to be a battle royal. It'll be, and I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out. It's been a hoot. friends from Winnipeg, friends from Vancouver here, all over the place. And it really has been a pleasure. And if I may, just for 1 second, I just want to read one little passage to close this off. It's the end of the day. Buddy's dawdling. The shop lights are off, and the view through the window is of a street wound down. Any pedestrians abroad are moving through the rain with the relief of being on the very last leg of a very long day. Vegetation slumbers, awaiting sunrise when the heliocentric members of the community will swivel their heads to the east, providing a wake-up call for the shrubs to shake a leg and the night spiders to seek the shade. No crows are airborne. They're all abed in the rookery. They've given over their territory to the local nocturnal flyers and the out-of-towners trying to negotiate the downtown core without dashing their brains out on the foolishly lit towers of glass. Through the short grass and the rough concrete, up sidewalks and alongside front yard hedges, waddle striped skunks and masked coons, bold as brass. In the alley, a stray cat struts. Thank you.